I've been asked to talk briefly today about why and how Guernsey as an economy and a jurisdiction is well positioned to take advantage of developments in the world of data. And there'll be a particular focus on the legal and regulatory framework that is and could be in place to promote our island's use of data in a new world. And the key takeaway for us all today, I think, from this at least, is that data presents a new opportunity to make Guernsey's existing businesses more competitive and efficient, as well as offering us a new industry in and of itself. I've gone to the wrong slide already, never mind. Echoing what Deputy Dudley Owen told us in our introductory remarks this morning, it's all jumping around. We've got a long history of making the most of our location, our independence, and our resources in order to thrive. And sometimes that's because we find new ways of doing things that other people haven't thought of, and other times it's a question of having the agility to simply do things better. And even where there is global uncertainty and change, and if you take a historical view, that's pretty much all of the time, Guernsey seems to have a knack of being able to do business against the odds. So I won't repeat the whistle-stop tour we had this morning, but you can see that century by century, broad overview, we have ideas, we have industries, circumstances change, and new ones come to the fore. In the last few decades, Guernsey's finance industry has emerged as the mainstay of our economy, and we have developed a reputation for innovation coupled with strong legal and regulatory frameworks, which have allowed us to drive advancements in company structures, the captive insurance market and private equity, which have often subsequently been copied successfully worldwide. In many ways, when it comes to legal and regulatory innovation, and increasingly, I'm hearing today, technical innovation, Guernsey sets the pace internationally. But it's not just about the financial services sector. Together with sport, tourism, horticulture and technology, including the creative sector and e-gaming, Guernsey may be small, but I think it clearly punches above its weight on the global stage. So what lies ahead? Well, in my view, finance will continue to play a key role in the success of this island. No doubt cruise ship passengers will continue to enjoy visiting, and the type of technology we help develop here will continue to evolve. But I also want to suggest that data can present new and unique opportunities for Guernsey. So what has Guernsey got going for it? In the data space, Guernsey's got a history of making things work and doing it better than others. And data is a high-value, low-footprint digital industry, which is perfect for a place like Guernsey. In April, the state's published its digital sector strategy, which sets out 10 strategic actions and the basis for policy, which aims to make Guernsey a centre of excellence for future digital technology. Data is obviously a critical part of that strategy, and target areas for digital businesses that deliver new business streams are listed there. They include big data analytics, digital IP, high-value data, vehicle telematics, cybersecurity, and high-value data storage and custodianship. With an eye on the future, I think we all want to lead the way in as many of those areas as we can, and we want to have a legal and regulatory framework that balances certainty and protection, but which also encourages high standards and growth. We have accessible and supportive lawmakers in this bailiwick who are keen to explore opportunities in data. And we have financial services and other regulators which encourage those with new ideas to approach them informally. And in the case of the financial services regulator, those of you who intersect with the regulated sector will be aware of the Innovation Soundbox. So far as international standards are concerned, we are well positioned to take the lead from international bodies and authorities as currently we do from the European Union in, for example, the data protection world. That doesn't mean that we blindly copy new laws and directives emanating from overseas. What it means is that we look at what is produced, we identify the need and benefits for Guernsey, and we ensure that our people and our businesses are recognised globally as being gold standard in whatever we do. Our size, physical isolation, and relatively small population can all be used in our favour. They're all assets. Where, to ask a rhetorical question, where better to store and process data or to test new ideas than on an island, a small island, in the middle of the ocean? Embracing opportunities in data doesn't mean that we have to invent a whole new legislative framework. In fact, we have most of it in place already, and for the most part, it works very well indeed. We have got a great data protection law, which I won't talk about because we're fortunate to have Emma Martin here who will be speaking after me. All I'll say is that it will get even better when the GDPR comes in, despite the bad press that instrument is getting. But just on that, data doesn't just mean personal data. There's a wide range of valuable insights created by data that doesn't contain personal information, and that can be mined and processed without all the necessary processes and controls that go to safeguard personal data. Finance industry means that we need to be fully compliant, of course, with international anti-money laundering standards and countering terrorist financing and financial crime generally. And I'm happy to say that not only do we keep up to date in that world, we stay ahead, and that's crucial to maintaining our worldwide reputation as an international finance sector of choice. On that, our openness to RegTech in the compliance sector, as exemplified by the draft New Proceeds of Crime Legal and Regulatory Handbook, will, on any view, foster innovation and help our compliance sector, and therefore our financial services industry generally, stay ahead with international competitors. One area of the legal landscape that I don't think any of the other speakers is going to look at in detail today is the law of e-commerce generally, so wider than data. This law, the Electronic Transactions Law, came along in 2000, which was a little later than data protection legislation. The driver for data protection legislation, if I remember rightly, was the rise in computing and the fears about this power, the power that this would give to the state and other large organisations with respect to the privacy of individuals. But of course, data protection laws have always applied to everybody, not just the state, and all personal data is covered, not just data in computerised form. But in contrast, the driver for this law, the Electronic Transactions Law, was globalisation and the rise of the internet-based economy. And so, unsurprisingly, this law was passed at around the time of the dot-com boom, which Guernsey wished to position itself to take advantage of. And the law was introduced to the states under a policy letter which was headed Legislation to Facilitate Electronic Commerce. And the introductory paragraph of the policy letter stated, I have to read this out, and this was in 2000, exploitation of the internet is generating a global revolution that is transforming economies throughout the world. This information society revolution is comparable in many ways to the Industrial Revolution, and major jurisdictions throughout the world have recognized the need to ensure that their legislation is capable of supporting electronic ways of doing business. Guernsey is no exception. The facilitation of such activity is fundamental to the future prosperity of a community such as Guernsey, and the appropriate legal environment is an essential prerequisite to success. That's the end of that quote. So the Electronic Transactions Law is, I'm afraid, largely technical in nature. That's because it needed to do the things that lawyers needed it to do. We needed to modernise the rules of documentary evidence to ensure that electronic documents are admissible in court proceedings. We needed to establish that electronic signatures were exactly equivalent to wet ink signatures. We needed and did clarify the liability of intermediaries, such as data storage businesses. And we ensured that there's no legal restriction on the application of encryption technology to support secure e-commerce. Of course, that will now have a resonance for blockchain technologies. But for all its technical nature, the express purpose of that law was clear and simple, and it was set out in the policy letter to ensure that both electronic and physical forms of information and communications have an equivalent legal status. And that aim, which we've achieved, has helped us transition, for the most part satisfactorily, from the old world into a new data economy. And another point I want to make about this law is its history. It provides an excellent example of just how quickly and nimbly Guernsey is able to support developing opportunities and ensure that we remain well placed to take advantage of them. The lawmakers didn't just look at what other jurisdictions might have been doing at the time. They didn't adopt an off-the-shelf solution and quickly import it and Guernseyfy it. Here's the timeline. A working group was established and published a provisional policy statement in 1999, and that called for revision of local legislation to meet certain international standards. A London firm of solicitors was appointed as specialist advisors to do a study. They commenced their study in November 1999, and they published their draft report in December 1999. And then over Christmas and New Year, there was a consultation process with industry, and already by the 21st of January 2000, the policy letter was ready to be sent to the States. The issue was then debated in February 2000, legislation was prepared and approved, and then it was progressively brought into force, the finished law, over the period October 2000 to March 2001. So that's less than 2 years under what was admittedly a more cumbersome system of government, in my view. It was 2 years from start to finish in what was actually a very technical and complicated legal area. And what we ended up with was an implemented bespoke solution that served us extremely well, because it's hardly been touched, this legislation, for nearly 2 decades. And that timeline is why, in my view, we can be confident that as a jurisdiction we have the agility and flexibility to respond rapidly to innovation so that we can take advantage of the opportunities that innovation presents to us. One particularly interesting feature of the law, as it's turned out, in terms of future-proofing, is a section which provides for the states to make rules about the legal effect of actions carried out by an electronic agent. When the law was passed in 2000, the states were advised that an electronic agent, and I'm quoting again, is a computer program that performs specified actions on behalf of its user without further reference to that user, such as searching for the lowest priced item and then agreeing to buy it. Now, that's 18 years ago. No doubt there are lots and lots of those programs now. And in fact, our laws of agency and contract formation must have been judged good enough to cope with those, because we haven't had to pass any rules or regulations under that provision yet. But we've been hearing today how the world has changed over the last 2 decades. We've now got blockchain technology and smart contracts. And this is just one area in which the old, I'll call it the old electronic transactions law, because it is now old, because of its flexible and its flexibility in the forward-thinking manner in which it was drafted, that law may yet have possibilities which simply could not have been imagined by anybody when it was being debated back in the year 2000. On smart contracts, I'm a lawyer of a certain age and certainly not a technician, but what I understand is that smart contracts are code which operates on a blockchain, which is essentially a big shared electronic ledger, and that code is self-executing. And as soon as it's deployed, a smart contract follows its internal logical rules. And what is particularly interesting, at least to a lawyer, about smart contracts is that they themselves, the contract themselves, can hold and deal with digital assets, such as cryptocurrency, as if they were themselves legal entities. So, for example, 2 parties could agree to hold cryptocurrency in a smart contract, and that contract will either return the funds to the sender or distribute them to the recipient if they both agree, or if some other event happens, and that could even be based on something happening in the real world which gets fed into the contract. So there is no human third party involved, and that's a radical shift from the world that we lived in until very recently. A real-life example is the recently launched Fizzy, which is an AXA insurance product, which allows you to buy, if you've seen it, delay insurance for a specific flight. So this smart contract, it's an insurance contract, it uses blockchain technology, it takes your payment, it reads flight data from external databases, and if your flight is delayed by a specified period of time, you automatically get paid out. There is no need to make a claim, there's no interaction with a human being in any way. The possibilities for these contracts are immense, and they include smart contracts dealing with other contracts. You could even have autonomous organizations which operate with minimal real human being input. That raises all sorts of regulatory and technical challenges, but it's is redolent with possibility. Smart contracts can produce a lot of data, which can yield valuable information as to who uses the contracts, what for, how often, the amounts involved, what the outcome is. That information does not have to be publicly available, it doesn't have to be personally identifying. The whole process can take place on anonymous or pseudonymous bases. And because we have this really good electronic transactions law, which has got this degree of future-proofing for electronic agents, it's just one aspect I've focused on for the purposes of today, we could, if necessary, very quickly enact rules and regulations which would enable us to take full advantage of that sector. And that has implications not only for our economy, but also for our society. The Financial Services Commission issued a consultation paper this summer about consumer protection. And amongst other things, the Commission identified that the rise of automation, for example, high-frequency trading platforms, robo-advisor algorithms, and bots, is leading to increasing questions about the legal capacity of such algorithms, bots, and pieces of software to bind the person or the company which is employing the technology. And according to that consultation paper, industry feedback had indicated that although things have been fine for 18 years under the transactions law, it was only a matter of time before we were going to hit the buffers of what was legally possible, as there's currently no absolute certainty as to the enforceability of contracts which are entered into by an algorithm. One solution, which the author of the paper identified rightly as relatively unique to Guernsey, would be to add the role of acting as an electronic agent to the scope of a new lending, credit and finance law, and identify the software itself as a legal body, i.e. a person like you, me, or a company, which could therefore be regulated in some way. And the consultation period closed last month, and we'll see what interest that's excited in industry shortly, but the potential implications for that, not just for lawyers but also for businessmen, are profound. Going back to opportunities, while what we currently have in terms of law and regulation works, we may need to tweak some laws, we may need to create regulation to address new ways of doing business, which includes data, or license new entities or operations in new ways. Luckily, we're very good at that as an island. And it's worth remembering, I think, that data isn't just a new sector in itself. Businesses of all types can benefit from analysing data, identifying patterns and spotting trends, which can increase their efficiency, as we've heard very persuasively put by John just before the lunch break. I wanted to mention a few recent notorious data security breaches. We've heard about Equifax. A few years ago, 3 billion of Yahoo's accounts were compromised, and passwords and personal data were stolen. All that has led, in the outside world, to uncertainty as to just how secure data is when it's stored on the cloud. The cloud just means, being stored on the cloud, means it's stored on the central server somewhere and it's accessible from anywhere. And we may see in future an increase in calls for secure data centers to store high-value data which can only be accessed by specific people for specific purposes on specific systems. rather than just via an internet browser. And here's a great opportunity for Guernsey. We're physically isolated, we're geographically close to the UK and Europe, we've got world-leading internet infrastructure and a strong IT sector, and storing and taking custody over data could be a growth industry for us. We've heard from Northern Trust earlier, who have already decided to store the private keys for their blockchain offering in Guernsey, and more could well follow. Exchange and trading of data is already big business, but the content of databases and the processes by which they are built need to be protected. And database rights, which can be governed by Guernsey law for databases situated here, could offer a strong international incentive for businesses to store their valuable, carefully collated databases here. And generally speaking, although it might be said that our intellectual property rights regime might benefit from Guernsey signing up to a few more international treaties to ensure better worldwide recognition and enforcement, we do have a great suite of IP legislation, and we've got a great, thoroughly modern stable of protected intellectual property rights, which include database rights. And there's a lot for us to be proud of on this front, given that in the final analysis, we are an island of only about 60,000 people. Businesses looking to offer analytics services may already have a strong target market here, or even a test bed, as we heard from Jay earlier, thanks to our existing financial sector, a forward-thinking government which embraces new technology to make residents' lives easier, and several significant international businesses already operating here. As a final thought, one possible outcome of Brexit and other current political developments is that Guernsey may have greater ability or incentive to accede to the treaties which will enhance our ability to offer IP protections through international agreements or organisations, as well as additional protections which only a small jurisdiction has the flexibility and agility to adopt. What we already have here is great, but there is scope, I think, to increase our intellectual property law's worldwide reach. In conclusion, I'd like to just draw a few thoughts together. The first one is that, as Guernsey people, we have a long pedigree of rapid and successful adaptation to change. It's very much in our DNA. The data revolution promises opportunities not only for the ways we carry out our existing businesses, but also for the development of new business streams entirely. And while our physical infrastructure is sound, so is our legal and regulatory landscape. Whether by accident or design, and we can argue about that over a drink later, but the answer doesn't matter, whether it's by accident or design, we are well placed to take advantage of those new opportunities, and only relatively minor adjustments to our existing laws, provided we've got the will to pursue those opportunities, are going to be necessary. That's all I wish to say. I think you've all suffered enough. Thank you very much.